problem here is that we have a reactive system, that rather than involve communities up front in setting comprehensive and smart plans for communities and for where development and growth is going to occur, we let developers bring projects and then try to ram them through the system and tokenize the community voice. That's absolutely what happened at Atlantic Yards, and we were one of the earliest voices out there in 2004 with a report real critical of that project in every way. What we need, instead of a reactive approach where developers come and say this is what we want, is an approach more like what they have in Seattle or Rochester or Portland, where every 10 years or so there's a substantial process that involves input from all stakeholders, from communities, from city planners thinking about, all right, what's on the horizon for the future of our city? Is there going to be growth in what ages in our school system for our seniors? And how are we going to think about that? Where do we need to see different services go? Where do we need to make the transportation investments? Where are the housing investments? And communities are involved in that process, so that it's got to go through a process called cross-acceptance, where when it works its way through, people have owned their fair share, because there are a lot of things in the city, like where we process our waste that no one wants in their neighborhood, but we have to work it out together. And so you go through this comprehensive process, neighborhoods have input, they know that if they wind up taking some share of additional growth or some of those things that folks don't want, they get the offsets that are going to make it livable. Then, once the comprehensive plan is in place, the only development that can come is development that meets that plan. And so developers are reacting to what the community wants and the city needs, and not vice versa. Just on Thursday of last week, we had Cecilia Estelano, the director of the Community Redevelopment Agency of Los Angeles, for Antonio Villaraigosa at NYU. We had about 350 people out for a conference that we sponsored at Pratt called One City, One Future. She talked about how they do this in Los Angeles, and we were just all blown away. The whole development plan comes from the needs of citizens for good jobs and affordable housing and a cleaner environment and a better city, and we can have that here too.
I think the original question was about eminent domain abuse, if I'm not mistaken. Can you read it?
Well, that was perfect. Let me read it again. Under Mayor Bloomberg, we have seen many developer-driven projects in New York City. Many of those projects include the threat of use of eminent domain. How do you envision the community's role in development?
Yeah, okay. So let me just first address eminent domain abuse, because I think it's something that should stir suitable outrage among all of us. We've had a whole host of development projects that have basically used the threat, either by putting a loaded gun on the table or actually, threatening to pull the trigger of eminent domain. And call me old-fashioned conservative, but at the end of the day, there is this thing called property values, and I think that's kind of important. I am kind of tired of the metaphor of the community having a seat at the table. I think it's time that the community set the table. And I think this goes back a little bit to what Brad was saying earlier. I think that the development process in our city systematically excludes community members from having an active voice and being heard on what gets built in their neighborhoods. And there's a reason for that. It has to do with the amount of money that gets raised by politicians when they try to go on from city council and run for higher offices. And frankly, it needs to stop, and we need to actively address that as an issue. So, I guess that's my feeling about that.
Okay.
Next question.
No, wait.
I really care about this. I'm sorry. I'm not keeping track of who answers the question. Bob. Thank you.
Well, I fully concur with Josh on eminent domain in general, and in specific with Atlantic Yards. But there's a few things that I think that we can do to involve the community more in community planning. One is we have to empower our community boards. Now, I serve on our board, on our board, Board 6, but I took serious issue with, and I like him about a lot of other things, but I took serious issue with our borough president when he single-handedly fired a whole number, I don't know, it was 9 or 10 community board members just because they were against Atlantic Yards. And we all know that was the reason. And I took issue with that. And if I'm in the council, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a screening panel of former community board members. And anyone who wants to apply to be on my line as a community board member will go through my screening panel. We will make sure that they are vetted and that they have the time and that they have the willingness and the ability to serve on the community board. So I think we need to empower community boards. I think that, there's the national organization Common Cause, and they have partnered in our neighboring state of New Jersey with a group that goes into towns. Now, we don't have towns, we have neighborhoods, right? But goes into towns in New Jersey and actually trains people on how to be citizen activists. And I think that that's a terrific model and something that we can use right here in Brooklyn and right here in New York City. And then, lastly, I think we need to work with all of our community-based organizations. I mean, I ran one, the Gowanus Canal Community Development Corporation, and we can use our CBOs as conduits to the community for input about what we want to see happen in our neighborhoods, not what they want to happen in our neighborhoods. So.